Hey, Evan.
Yeah?
I was just thinking we should do a collaboration.
Oh, sure. What do you have in mind?
This.
Hello and welcome to Panzermeister 36. In today's video, I'll be doing a collaboration series with me, Small Soldier.
Thank you, Scott. Yes, today Scott and I are going to be building T-34s with 122mm howitzers. In Scott's video, he's going to be building the Ryefield kit that models this modern Egyptian version with a large Russian 122mm howitzer. And I'm going to be building this planned but never actually put to production World War II Soviet attempt to mount the D-11 howitzer in the T-34.
And it's all coming up right now.
Alright, so here's everything I'm going to be using to make my T-34. The base kit's going to be this very nice T-34 76 number 112 factory from Dragon. This is probably one of the best, if not the best, Dragon T-34 kit. And I'm going to be adding on this Wilder resin conversion, which gives you the turret. This is out of production and very hard to find now. I had a man actually send this to me because he was never going to use it. And I also have these spare steel row wheels from a different kit, so we're just going to add those in as well, because it looks pretty cool. So what's typical from these Dragon T-34s, they give you like spare everything, spare turrets, spare wheels, 3 of everything. A lot of it's blue and you can just disregard a whole bunch of pieces immediately. And I also got rid of all the turret sprues, so honestly I'm building like half the kit. They also give you the tracks and sprues here, which aren't actually that bad. The cleanup's very easy because they're on the sides, the attachment points. And they're probably better than the actual magic tracks you get in other kits, because the magic tracks have sink marks on either side of the guide horn there, or I guess ejection pin marks. The inner guide horn hollowness is better on the magic tracks, but you can't really tell that when you put the mud on there anyways, so the more correct, for this vehicle at least, tracks I'm going to use anyways for the sprues. And you also get some very nice decals and photo etch in this kit, which I guess we'll use the decals later. Right, so I don't really want to bore you guys too much with just video of me sanding parts and stuff, so we're going to go through this pretty quickly. I want to show the sprue cutters I'm using here. These are the Tamiya 74123 cutters. They're very good. And they let you get real close because they're nice and sharp and they don't do that much damage if you get close. So you can get nice and close to the attachment points there and cut off most of the sprue gate without actually damaging the wheels. That speeds up sanding pretty quick, as does actually using metal files, as you can see here. I use metal files instead of sanding sticks because the metal files just cut through it way faster. And I'm using Tamiya Extra Thin to glue everything that's plastic. So I threw together the drive sprockets and eilers there, though I have the steel row wheels from a previous kit, as I mentioned. Now, a lot of the sprues in these T-34s are very old, probably older than I am. You can see the back sprue there is a different color than the one in front. That's because the back sprue is very old. You can see all these pin marks all over it. Bad flash and everything, and also look at that grease on the swing arm there. That's nasty. Also, the lower hull is very old as well. It's a little bit soft in detail, and it requires some corrections here, like removing one of these bump stops for the front swing arm. But honestly, once you put on all the row wheels and stuff, you can't really see the flash on the swing arms. You can't see the pin marks on the shock absorber bits, and you can't really see that part I got rid of anyways, the bump stop there. Once the tracks are on, it's not really worth bothering too much with that stuff. More modification was required here to put on the special 112 factory track pin knock plate. That's just what you get with Dragon kits, lots of old sprues and stuff just being reused, and you have to modify everything to fit. So for the lower hull, they immediately have you, they at least tell you to put on these lower hull bits on the front and back. Now, I did not put these on because they have to interlock nicely with the parts that go on the upper hull section. And I know the fit's going to be terrible, so I left them off until I actually glued the upper and lower hulls together. Now, similarly, there's so much to cut off here. Like, there's all these molding points for spare, like, tool bins and fuel tanks and everything. I had to spend, like, basically a day just sanding off all the crap on this hull because, like I said before, Dragon gives you really old hulls with basically fittings for every possible T-34 version. So you get rid of everything. And also got rid of the fenders as well because they give you photo etch ones in this kit. So here I'm actually thinning down the ends of the fenders here because I want them to look nice and in scale. These are just thin sheet metal, so I'm hacking away with my knife, getting them nice and thin, and then I do a little bit of touch-ups at the end with my file here just to get it nice and thin. That looks much better than the big blob we had before. And when they're thin, they're a lot easier to bend by hand to cause battle damage, because these things just get knocked up all the time. So I just bent that up there by hand. I did the same thing on the other side. And also on the rear, you can see that, and also kind of along the length of the fender, you can see it's kind of just bent. I was just kind of flexing it by hand and stuff. It's pretty easy. So there's these things here, these blobs, I guess you'd call them. That's because you can use plastic parts here or photo etch, and the photo etch parts look way better. So first step, we gotta remove the molded on blobs here, and also the little locating points for the plastic options. Then we get the photo etch pieces over here. They're very, very small, but honestly the cleanup's pretty easy because on these parts at least the cleanup's at the bottom. And I use a little file here, it's different smaller file, to sand up the location point where they meet the fret, and then I just bend them very carefully with a small pair of tweezers here. It's all really basic for this for these photo etch parts. And then I'm gluing them on with Gorilla Glue Gel Super Glue. I like that glue because it doesn't set immediately. As you can see, I can actually adjust the part right there a little bit. You have about maybe 5 seconds before it really hardens and sets, so you can just do a little bit of modification of the part after you touch it on and kind of fine tune the location. So here's the photo etch for those little straps there, or those strap tie downs. This is a very, very good detail to add to your kit, so it's a little bit of work, but it looks a lot better than the plastic blobs. Now we can glue the upper and lower hull sections together, and oh my god, look at that seam, that's nasty, that big gap there. Oof. Alright, so I couldn't really clamp this because the hull is really, really big and my clamps are all too small, so I just had to kind of put glue in that gap there and then just hold it with my hands for about 10 minutes. See, I gotta clamp it in the corner there where I can fit it, but I just played a YouTube video and held it here for a little while until it dried. And once it was dry, actually, it was very, very nice. You can see the gap is mostly gone. I didn't bother filling it because we're going to put mud there anyways, so it's good enough for now. Now this is really sloppy from Dragon. They could have put that sprue attachment point anywhere else on this thing, like half a millimeter further up and it would have been invisible, but they put it right at the spot where it's visible. So you got to make sure you clean up this sprue gate point nicely. And it's also right in this weld seam along the top there. You can see there's like a weld seam right down the middle. It's just a pain in the butt to get rid of that sprue attachment point. I'm gluing it on here with some more extra thin and putting on the shield covers. As you can see, if that part would have been a little further up, it would have been behind the shield where that attachment point was, but Dragon just says no. So we got these special hinges on the 112 factory vehicle. They're supposed to interlock very nicely like that. So I first glued the upper hull part because it was more visible, and I wanted to make sure I could get it to fit very nicely on the upper hull corners. So it kind of just popped into place. Some more Tamiya extra thin in there, and this panel fit very, very well. So I glued in the bottom panel, and once again we have a big, huge gap. Luckily, I was actually able to clamp this one because I was able to use those little shackle points at the bottom and the hinges to kind of get my clamps some grip. So I was actually able to do this with not holding it. So I just get a little bit more extra thin on there. Clamped it nicely and let it sit for about 10 minutes or so. So some of the newer sprues in this kit actually have some very, very nice weld seam detail, like this hull machine gun port there. And they also even put the sprue attachment points there, or the extra sprue gates at the bottom, so they weren't even interfering with the weld seam. So actually cleanup's real easy there. You just kind of cut them off from the bottom. And then I made sure I got lots of extra thin on here to make sure that weld nicely kind of blended in with the actual hull plate, because the weld shouldn't have a little bit of a gap. It should be nice and smooth out across them. In my spare bin I also found this, this is not a bow gun, this is actually a flamethrower. I just kind of put it on there because I thought that fit the close support howitzer vehicle a little bit better. That's pretty cool. So at this point I also put on the lower and upper hull parts for the front, the plates here. They fit much better than the rear hull area. There was not really any clamping required there except for just the corners for the upper hull plate, and as you can see, the upper hull plate actually has a huge gap there. It's because the interlock on this 112 factory vehicle should be part of the side of the hull. So again, it's a generic Dragon hull, so the interlock is just not present because other T-34s didn't have that. So I had to fill this with a little bit of Tamiya extra thin cement mixed with some putty. I also stippled this stuff over the bow machine gun and also the driver's port there, because those should actually have a cast texture. That would have been easier to do with the parts not on the tank, but I completely forgot. So after I kind of stippled it on there, I sand it back a little bit with a sanding stick, just to kind of get rid of the spikiness, but make sure that there's still some texture. Just sand it a little bit pretty quickly. And then also get rid of the, I'll just kind of sand off what I filled here to make sure the side of the hull meshes nicely with the interlock portion of that front armor plate. So the lower hull is pretty much all done. As you can see, I also put on one of the rear fenders here, and I also put on the louvers here for the engine deck. You have to put on the photo etch for the vent over here as well. So the grill vent area has actually two photo etch parts. You have like a frame and then a mesh. I find it easier to glue them together and then bend them and then put them on. So I get some more of the Gorilla Glue Gel Super Glue, which remember has a little bit of time before it fully dries. So I can actually put it on here. And I can adjust it a little bit before I actually kind of have it in the final position. It dries in like 10 seconds, and that's pretty good. So I found that my hobby knife was a very, very good radius to get a nice bend going on this grill here, and then it basically fit in perfectly. That was a nice curve for the engine deck panel. So I get a little bit more glue on the sides, and then just kind of pushed it into place here and held it again for 10 seconds. There we go, that looks pretty nice. They also give you a plastic option in the kit, but the grill is not see-through and it's pretty bad. And also the photo etch one here, you can give some nice battle damage to by just kind of poking it with a knife and making some holes. Just be careful you don't really ruin this thing. And also try to make the battle damage asymmetrical. As you can see here, it looks more natural that way for some reason. So I'm putting more damage on one side just because it looks not unnatural to be kind of random like this. Also made sure that they kind of poked it a little bit just to make it look a little more interesting. And that looks pretty cool on there, along with the rear fender that I damaged up a little bit. Also want to point out that there are little kind of bolt holes for the fender, and on the side where I didn't put the fender on, over here, I actually drilled them out to make the bolt holes hollow. Just a tiny little detail there. Right, so these fuel bins in the back build up pretty nicely, but they kind of have these huge gaps and doesn't look very nice. That's a little bit better there. So what I'm using there is Archer resin decal transfer something weld seams. I don't really know how to describe them, but they work a lot like decals. So like I said, they're from Archer Fine Transfers. They come on decal sheet paper, and they're just like resin weld seams. So you cut them out as you would a decal. You can see I'm just kind of putting it next to it to get the right length. And I put it in some warm water for about 30 seconds, and then it basically comes off like a decal. You adjust it into position there. So I can adjust it a little bit, like I said, like a decal. These are really, really nice actually. And then get some microsol. This is setting solution. So it softens up the decal and makes sure it kind of binds on nicely. Brush that on a little bit. And I glue these in place. The weld seams they're a lifesaver. Those things save so much time. If it's a nice flat weld, the Archer ones are brilliant, and it's a very, very nice detail there, fixing those big kind of gaps that there were there, because these would be welded in real life. They're just metal boxes. Alright, now for the tracks, like I said before, they're actually pretty easy. You just kind of cut them off and then sand them flush on the sides, because they actually were kind enough to make sure the attachment points were on the sides of the tracks. So my method for assembling the tracks is a little bit different than most people's. I assemble them in 4 different lengths. So first I'll do the bottom section, and then I'll do a curved section on the back, a straight section on the top, and then another curved section on the front. So you can see I've already put on the bottom section and the section around the drive sprocket at the rear, and now I'm putting on the top section. I do it in these sections here because it gives me a little more time to work with it, because I can basically just leave the section with the idler wheel, in this case the front, at the very end, and adjust the tracks to make sure they fit nicely. And since the extra thin cement dries pretty quick, doing it in sections like this helps a little bit. I know I can use this lower setting glue, but this is just my style. So I just push a little bit of sag into the tracks there along the top, and then I put some sponge in there to make sure they can form nicely. T-34 shouldn't have too much sag, but a little bit looks nice like that. And then now I'm putting on the front section of tracks here. So I glue them on the bottom, but I didn't glue them at the front here because I want them to come off easily. Then I can adjust the idler wheel here by pushing it a little bit to make sure they all fit nicely. And here's our lower hull, all complete. This is the extent of the Dragon kit we're going to build. The next step is, of course, the turret, which is a resin set. These Dragon T-34s are pretty nice, but could use some updates. Alright, now for the Wilder set from resin. This is out of production, like I said. An Adam man sent this to me from his stash. But I was actually surprised at how kind of basic this was. A lot of parts were molded very, very nicely together, and there's beautiful cast textures and everything, beautiful welds, even a metal gun barrel. It's impressive how nice that thing looks. And the instructions, as you can see here, they give you like this nice full color fold out sheet. And then on the back of it, actually, there's a nice photo of the one that Adam Wilder himself built. It's pretty cool. When working with resin, you gotta make sure that you actually clean up afterwards. All the sanding dust and everything like that is toxic. So when you're sanding like this, wet sanding is a good idea, and also I get rid of my paper towels on the bottom here when I'm done because they're full of dust. And then these parts just popped into place. And when I was gluing stuff, I was using the Gorilla Glue super glue once again. Like, look, this just pops right into place. It's amazing. I didn't even need to glue that. It would have just stayed. I really wish it was still in production because that's really, really cool. The mallet just pops on. I didn't bother with the internal breech part. I just left that out, but it comes with a kind of rudimentary breech like most kits do these days. We have a bit of a gap there on the side of the turret, vertically next to where the gun sticks in. I'm going to use this styrene rod here. This is 0.1 or 0.015 inch diameter styrene rod. And I'm going to make some weld seams. You can see I've already glued the piece in place with some super glue. And then now I'm using some Tamiya extra thin cement to soften up the piece. And I'm going to make a bunch of cuts in it using the sharp end of my hobby knife to kind of make it, like you could say, like a stack of dimes, like a nice bunch of little cylinders put together. Then I get some more extra thin on there to soften it up once again and make sure they don't kind of fall apart. And then I'm using kind of like the back or the tip of my blade here to kind of smush those individual dimes, like I said, into what looks more like a weld seam. I have another video focusing entirely on the weld seams here. If you're curious, I recommend you check that out. But you can see that looks like a nice low quality Russian weld. If you ever want to see a Russian weld, just look at T-34. They're pretty disgusting, actually. We had a little bit of a gap where the top and bottom of the turret went together, and I figured that it would look nice, kind of mimicking a T-34, to fill that with a nice casting seam, rather than just filling it with putty and making it smooth. So I wanted to make sure that this didn't look like a weld seam, it's a casting seam. So I made it a lot more sloppy. As previously, I softened the styrene rod with some extra thin cement to make it a little bit mushy. And then I made my cuts kind of at a 45-degree angle, instead of 90 degrees to the styrene rod. I kind of just was really messy, was poking around, making it just sloppy. And then afterwards I sanded it back a little bit to smooth it out a little bit. And I hope that once I paint this, it'll look like a casting seam and not more like the weld seams on the side of the turret there. That's the hope, at least. And with that, we've completed the build of our T-34-122. Now, I think this thing looks absolutely awesome. It's like a little baby KV-2 with a massive flat-sided turret and the big howitzer. That looks pretty mean. The cast textures we added to the bow machine gun and driver's port look nice, along with the weld seam we added to the turret, and also the casting seam here. Even though it was a little bit of work, the kit supplied photo etch tie downs and the rear mesh here, as well as the photo etch fenders in the back, all add a nice touch of detail to the kit, as do the resin weld seams we add on the fuel tanks here. For flat straight sections, those Archer weld seams are very, very useful. I left off most of the fenders as well as the toolboxes and a couple of other details in the effort to make this tank look like a prototype, as if it were testing this massive turret that was never actually put into production. I hope you've enjoyed our little buddy build so far. I recommend you go check out Scott's channel, Small Soldier, for his very similar video building his own T-34 122 from Ryefield model. I also hope you look forward to the next part in our series here, where we're both going to be painting and weathering our T-34 in the next video. With that, I'll leave you with Scott for the final words. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching Panzermeister 36. I hope you enjoyed our channel mashup. I know I had a great time. As always, please consider subscribing, hit the bell notification below, give me a thumbs up, and let us know what your favorite part of the collaboration was. And that's all for now. Until next time, bye-bye now.